all you have to do is begin to search for it. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that a lot of the readers, once they have read my Bloodlines of the Illuminati book, and then once they maybe have read some of the other books that I have and gotten a basic understanding of what's going on, they're going to start seeing these things all around them, and they can teach themselves, and they can further their understanding on their own without my help.
Okay, Fritz. Well, let's jump a little bit inside of the book, okay? I know you mentioned as one of the Illuminati families, the Kennedy family. Now, with all of their recent tragedy in the past few decades, how can you still feel like the Kennedys are major contributors to this whole power structure?
There's definitely been some power struggles, and the Kennedys have been on the short end of the power struggles. That's true. But after John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and his brother, Ted Kennedy still was an extremely powerful senator because of his tenure and all of the committees he was on and everything. He was one of the most powerful men in the United States. So that immediate family, you know, continues to be called by the news media as America's royal family. But let's understand that the Kennedy bloodline is far greater than just John F. Kennedy's family.
Well, what do you mean, Fritz? I think most people would, when they think of the Kennedys, they think, oh, well, you had John's father, Jack was it, and he made all his money. Basically, you hear rumors that he made most of his money through Prohibition, and then he made a killing off of the stock market crash. And really, that's when we start to hear about the Kennedys. Are you trying to tell me that they have a history that goes further back?
Yes, they have a history that goes way further back. In fact, the Kennedys are descendants from Brian Boru, who was the first Kennedy, and he was one of the most significant kings in European history. So you see that they're tied back to royalty. In fact, John F. Kennedy's sister married into British royalty. So these are just not commoners that grew up in a log cabin. But there's something that I would point out to our listeners out there in television land, and that is that the movers and shakers do not become rich and powerful and then join the Illuminati. They become rich and powerful because they are part of these Illuminati bloodlines, and their councils decide how they're going to divide up such things as the drug trade, monopolies, and things like this. And so when you see these families like the Astor family go from being totally poor, and in a few years John Jacob Astor is the richest man in North America. And maybe I'll use him as an example.
Okay.
Since I got started talking on him. John Jacob Astor came from Germany, from a small town, Waldorf. His background was being a butcher. He couldn't hardly speak any English. His English was broken. And he was the type of person that if you were sitting beside him eating, he might grab your shirt and wipe his dirty face on it while he was eating the meal. He was gross, he was crude, he was not somebody that you would enjoy being around. Yet this man who could barely speak English and who is an exceptionally obnoxious person, within a few years became the most richest man in America. Now, how did that happen? There had been fur trade for hundreds of years, but all of a sudden he comes to America and monopolizes the entire fur trade basically on North America. Now, how did he gain control? It's because somebody in the Illuminati councils had decided the Astor bloodline, which is a bloodline that goes back to antiquity, the name is a derivative of Astarte, they had decided that the Astor family, you know, would be given that privilege. Why did Bill Clinton become president? Somebody made the decision many years ago. You can look back at the things Bill popped off and said as he was a kid. He said, "I'm going to be president."
Okay, Fritz. Well, we talked a little bit about the Kennedys, and I noticed that another Illuminati family that you mentioned in your Bloodline book is the Onassis family. Now, as far back as I can remember, just out of recent memory, the only Onassis I could ever think of was Aristotle Onassis. And really the only reason I bring him up is because we talked about the Kennedys, and they seem to be linked a little bit. Could you briefly describe how the Onassis fit into this picture?
Onassis was, again, someone like John Jacob Astor. His family lived, Aristotle's father Socrates lived in Turkey, and at the end of World War I, the Turks committed genocide against the Greeks, and the Americans had a warship off of the coast, and very strange thing happened. I mean, you have millions of Greeks being killed, but for some reason this American warship sends a party of Marines ashore, and the one person they rescue is some obscure boy named Onassis. And the reason they give is because he had sold a bottle of liquor to the captain of the ship, and the captain of the ship had taken a liking to him. Well, that's a nice story. So then Onassis comes to South America. He lands in South America penniless in Argentina. But supposedly by washing dishes, within a few years, he's a multimillionaire, one of the richest people in the world.
From being a dishwasher?
Yeah, yeah. Some jobs like being a dishwasher. You know, you can see this kind of stuff in Back to the Future with Biff, you know. Yeah. And this is what we're talking about. So what I'm getting at is he became rich because he was in one of these bloodlines. How extensive is that bloodline? Who else is part of that bloodline? I don't know the full extent of that bloodline. Mm-hmm. I know that in working with people that were in that I brought out of the Illuminati, most of the people of these bloodlines do not have surnames that match the bloodline that they belong to. Their only major connection, so to speak, is when they are put before the Grand Dame, and she is to give her approval as to whether they're accepted into the Illuminati or not when they're like age 3, and they're given a physical inspection, just like the Masons don't want anybody who's got physical defects. Mm-hmm. And they're given an overall inspection, and in that initiation ceremony they will announce what bloodline they belong to. But then they will continue going through life with a plethora of other names.
Okay. Well, Fritz, after hearing you speak over the weekend, I think one of the best examples to help people kind of understand how the Illuminati control world events, could you kind of briefly describe some of the major events of the Illuminati-controlled World War II?
Oh, of World War II.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I'll focus on that. I might just mention to our audience, I could go back and essentially every war that there is, I could go through and show how these families have created them, manipulated them. Well, you can look at Wall Street, and the Illuminati families on Wall Street were the ones that financed Hitler to come to power. Also, you'll see that the Krupp family in Germany, plus a few other leading industrial Illuminati giants.
Now, you're talking about the Krupps that make the coffee machines. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm talking about the Krupps that make a lot more than coffee machines. I don't know how many thousands of factories they have today, but they were the ones that built the tanks and a lot of other, the locomotives and a lot of the other steel works that the Germans needed for their war machinery. And these people were the ones, well, one of them said, "We've hired Hitler." So they viewed Hitler as their hireling. So American and German and British Illuminati financiers brought Hitler to power. So you had that aspect happening. And then the dialectics that was created that created the issues and how the war came about were also Illuminati family manipulations. And then the United States' entry into the war. Let me point out something here. We haven't mentioned Freemasonry, but Freemasonry is the continuation of the mystery religions.
Okay.
And Freemasonry and the Illuminati are like a glove in a hand.
Well, hold on just a second, Fritz. I mean, I know some Freemasons. I even work with one, and I mean, he seems to be the most down-to-earth guy I've ever known. And as a matter of fact, if I even get to talking to politics too much about him, I feel kind of sort of that I even know a little bit more what's going on than him. How is he controlling the world?
Oh, he's just a member of a lodge system. We're talking, the lodge system needs a lot of good men at the base to support its structure. And 2/3 of the Freemasons don't go beyond the 3rd degree. They're that financial base supporting this pyramid structure. But at the top, we have these people. For instance, the Sinclair family, which is part of the 13th Illuminati family, they were given, if you'll look in Masonic Encyclopedia, you'll see that they're listed as having been given headship over the Freemasons, and that was something that was to be passed from generation to generation. So you'll see that these bloodlines are in control of Freemasonry, just like so many other things. The royal family of Britain has been at the top of Freemasonry in the United Kingdom. So it's not that every Freemason is in the Illuminati. It's that this is just one more system or lodge or secret society that's controlled by them, and Freemasonry just happens to be, has been in the past. It's no longer so much the powerful tool that it was in the past, but it's been one of their most powerful tools in the world for carrying out what their agenda.
Okay.
So let's see. Let's pick up where I was.
Back to World War II?
Back to World War II. The reason why I had to bring in the Freemasons is Stalin and Churchill and Roosevelt, who were the Allied leaders. They were all three Freemasons. And Churchill was of the Illuminati bloodlines, and so was Roosevelt. Stalin married into one of these prominent Kaganovich, if I'm pronouncing the Russian name right. He married into a prominent Illuminati bloodline. And in fact, you see in Russian politics that same family that Stalin was married to is still very powerful in Russian politics. But anyway, so you had three people that are controlling these countries, or at least are the visible political leaders of these countries that are all on the same team. And Germany and Japan and several other smaller countries that join them are arrayed against Russia and the United Kingdom. And the British And Churchill was of the Illuminati bloodlines, and so was Roosevelt. Stalin married into one of these prominent, Kagangovich, if I'm pronouncing the Russian name right. He married into a prominent Illuminati bloodline.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, you see in Russian politics that same family that Stalin was married to is still very powerful in Russian politics. But anyway, so you had three people that are controlling these countries, or at least are the visible political leaders of these countries that are all on the same team. And Germany and Japan and several other smaller countries that join them are arrayed against Russia and the United Kingdom. And the British wanted the Americans to enter the war. Roosevelt wanted us to enter the war. So,
but wasn't Roosevelt's one of his campaign promises at that time not to enter the European war?
Right, right. Just the same as Wilson. Before World War I, his campaign was he would keep us out of the war. And then very shortly after he became president, he declared war on Germany. And it was such a trauma to my grandfather, because he had voted for Wilson, that he never voted Democrat again in his life. He had such a strong reaction. He had a knee-jerk reaction. He always voted Republican after that. But yeah, that was a campaign promise. But see, these people, they say whatever it takes to be popular, and then they do whatever they want, because we don't mean anything to them. And so, in going back and researching, I came across a book that was written which described aircraft carrier warfare in the Pacific in a war between Japan and the United States before there was ever an aircraft carrier built. And this book describes basically World War II. So this is rather amazing that someone was already thinking this stuff out. And then you'll see that when one studies it out, that the American military brought the Japanese Navy over to Pearl Harbor and specifically showed them item by item how the Pearl Harbor could be attacked. And then on the basis of that, those tours, the Japanese went back, made up their battle plans. American intelligence and British intelligence knew of the battle plans. They watched the Japanese fleet practice for their attack on Pearl Harbor. And then Roosevelt, to make sure that there was a lot of losses, the day before they attacked, he had all of our planes put on the airfields in circles with their noses pointed towards the center of the circle, so that it'd be very hard for them to take off when the Japanese attacked. There was a lot of things like this that were done to make sure that there was a lot of Americans that died so that they could get United States into the war. You know, I could talk for hours about how they created this war and then how they kept it going. The Illuminati, well, shortly after Pearl Harbor, President Roosevelt, and I showed the documentation in my talk here in Austin from the federal codes. He drew up an executive decree which allowed the Secretary of the Treasury, Morgenthau, to exempt whoever he wanted so that they could trade with the enemy. So these Illuminati families, like the Rockefellers, who controlled Standard Oil, and Onassis, were given the freedom to trade with the Germans so that they could keep the Germans supplied with essentials like diamonds there's a lot of industrial uses for diamonds, including they were needed for the gyroscopes and the gyroscopes for the V-2 rockets and everything. They supplied Germany with oil, designs for military equipment, and a lot of other things that, had the Illuminati not been given that special privilege of continuing to trade with Germany during the war would have come to an end easily by 1942.
So basically, we had an embargo on Germany if we wanted to, but we just never closed the embargo. Or we just never kept the supplies from coming into the country.
Well, if you were one of these Illuminati bloodlines, one of these powerful men, kingpins is the word I use, within these Illuminati bloodlines, you had the privileged status of being above the war.
Above the war.
The rest of us, it was a real war.
And actually, Fritz, I think I can remember from your book, as from the Onassis chapter, his fleet of ships almost went unscathed. Is that correct?
Totally unscathed. They were never attacked.
How many ships did he have?
It was between 200 and 300 ships, merchant ships.
And he's from the Greek fleet, correct?
Yeah,
Greek merchant ships.
His ships flew the Greek flag. Essentially, every other Greek ship that was floating when the war started was sunk. But his ships went in all of the theaters of the war, the Mediterranean, the North Sea, and they were never attacked by either side. It took collaboration at the highest levels for him to travel around in a world war without anybody bothering him, while he made millions, perhaps billions of dollars off of the whole thing.
This is incredibly fascinating. I tell you what, Fritz, we're almost running out of time here, but before we do, I would like you to briefly touch on, I know you mentioned it earlier, how the Bush family has been coming into prominence here of late. Could you give us maybe a little bit more of a background behind that family?
Some of our listeners out there may be familiar with the Order of the Skull and Bones, which is a chapter of the Illuminati, and that they have rituals with satanic undertones. One of the things that they do is lay in a pile of manure when they're being initiated and say all of their sexual exploits. Yeah, I know. Satan causes his minions to do degrading things that they think, for some reason, because their minds get warped, that this is something great. The Bush family is related, it's one of those families that's related back to British royalty. Mm-hmm. And Bush was head of the CIA. And I think it's significant to point out, if our listeners haven't caught it already, they may have already noticed this themselves, but you had the head of the KGB. You know, the KGB has been running Russia and the USSR, and over here we had the head of the CIA, George Bush, who becomes president, and now his son is running. It should make people realize that, at least, that the intelligence agencies have co-opted these countries. But it's deeper than that, because the intelligence agencies are being used as a front for these powerful families. And there's literature out there that talks about how the intelligence agencies have been prostituted to these powerful families. In fact, KGB intelligence, a large share of their intelligence, is simply being used to spy on Western industry and companies so that they can take all these trade secrets back for Russian capitalists, or Russian gangsters, I should say.
Wow, truly incredible. Also, Fritz, I remember this also from your talks over the weekend. I don't want people to think that you're like the only person out there talking about it, and not just today, but I mean throughout history. I remember you mentioned how Senator McCarthy, most people think out there that McCarthy was just afraid of communists, but it's really, from your research, Fritz, do you really think that was the case?
No, it wasn't the case. I mean, I was like everybody else. I only knew what I'd been told until I started reading speeches and talks and things that he had written. And I was blown away. I realized the man knew exactly that there were these powerful families, that there was a world order, and he was going after these powerful families. That's why he went after the Bundys. And of course, the Illuminati kingpins in our government thwarted an investigation into Bundy. Yeah, he really understood, and so because he was after these powerful people, these movers and shakers, they have used him as a verbal punching bag. I mean, I've watched, I don't know how many people denegate his name, even, you know, in the last few years. I mean, you think the guy has been dead for a long time, they'd forget him, but Bill Clinton has used him as a punching bag, and then George Bush. So
it's almost, the Illuminati almost use him as an example. Like, if you come after us, this is what's going to happen to you. Isn't that correct?
Yes, yes.
That's totally horrible. Well, I know we've just got a few minutes left now, for sure. But before we go, I wanted to ask you, Fritz, how can we, as normal, everyday people, recognize perhaps the policies or the agendas which are pushed on us through the Illuminati front organizations?
Oh boy, that's a good question, but it's also a big question. Well, you will see that there are certain things that are politically correct. And you will also notice that the world is going towards central control.
Right.
It's going towards globalization, where we're having the United Nations. You know, the United Nations was formed out of the League of Nations, and there's a continual push to have one political, one world government.
Now, isn't that just a natural evolution of perhaps human society? I mean, as the world seems to be getting smaller and smaller through technology, most people would say that would just be a natural evolution of our whole government system.
Well, it's definitely being pushed. And whether one wants to believe that's a natural outgrowth of improved communication and transportation, that's up to the individual, but it is definitely being pushed. It's taking a lot of money and a lot of effort to make it happen, and the push behind it are these global elite families that are controlling things from behind the scenes. So not only do we have political globalization, but we have economic globalization, and we have religious globalization. So when you see any kind of an agenda that contributes to this one world order, or as the Bush has called it, New World Order, or, you know, Hitler, who was also of these bloodlines, also referred to New World Order. That seems to be a popular term with them.
Right, and I noticed earlier, when you had mentioned it, you just said world order, that you didn't put the new in there. Why is that?
Because it's not new at all. In fact, they keep using the same formulas. The things that controlled people back in ancient Rome, you know, where they had bread and circus, they're using the same formulas that they used in antiquity on us today. And bread and circus simply means that if you give the common person entertainment and plenty of food, like the junk food we get, they'll be happy. And most people, as long as they have their beer and their football game, are happy.
Unfortunately, that is true. Well, I tell you what, Fritz, I really appreciate you coming down here, taking time out of your busy schedule to come give us an interview, and I look forward to having more talks with you in the future.
Thank you. It's great being with you.
and you then are prepared for the New World Order. They've been preparing people for many years, and it's almost here. It's almost here.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order. World order. New